Welcome to Satsang.
Hello, Vishrant. Can you please talk about why higher consciousness is so hard?
So everyone gets born into lower consciousness. The animals are in lower consciousness. Our primal imperative to survive is basically lower consciousness. And for someone to go from lower consciousness to higher consciousness, they have to challenge their primal programming, the programming to survive, because it keeps us locked in lower consciousness. The other thing with adult humans is they nearly all went to school and nearly all learnt to live in their heads so they could pass exams by repeating answers, so they could get a diploma or a degree or something. And they learnt to live in their heads to do that. And they never ever recovered from doing that. And of course, living in your head or dreaming or thinking constantly keeps you in lower consciousness also. And this is why if you go into any Buddhist monastery, anywhere in the world, the first thing they're probably going to teach you is meditation, because meditation is about putting awareness on what is real. And the only thing that is not real is what you think. It seems real, but it's not. And so it is difficult to go from lower consciousness to higher consciousness, because you have to get present to reality to start with. And you have to learn to accept life as it is, and ultimately learn surrender, which is a non-doing. This runs counter to survival. This runs counter to our primal imperative to survive. Nowhere in our programming, genetically or causally, are we programmed to surrender. We're programmed to fight and resist and survive. And so in going for higher consciousness, going for enlightenment, we're actually going against our nature. We're going against our primal imperative to survive. This is why it is so difficult, because we've developed default patterns of survival as well, default patterns of dreaming, default patterns of not being present here to reality. These things need to be looked at and changed. If we practice acceptance, we're starting to move to change because we're learning surrender. If we practice openness, same thing. If we practice meditation, we're recovering ourselves from a dream that we're lost in back to a form of reality which is out here. There's nothing real about what's in here. It's asleep. It's dreaming. And so it is difficult for people to raise their consciousness levels, particularly if they've been programmed to be victims of life, constantly seeing themselves as victims of situations or other people or even themselves. Because this is a dream, it's not a real. You have to volunteer to be a victim. Like, bad stuff can happen, but you have to volunteer to be a victim of it. The moment you go into victim orientated thinking, you've gone into lower consciousness, you've gone into dream. And of course, the lowest part of that, of course, is anger. Anger is just a dream. Without dream, anger doesn't exist. It's where you get to blame something, yourself, a situation, or another person. You get to be a victim. And so in raising our consciousness levels, we need to learn to allay our nature. We need to learn to be present to reality. We need to practice openness, acceptance. There are some beautiful side effects of that. When we practice acceptance and openness, we start to find love. So that's very sweet. If all we do in the world is practice closure and defensiveness, Well, in a lot of ways, we've cut ourselves off from the perception of love. And love is the true jewel of consciousness. And so, in going for higher consciousness, people start perceiving love because they're opening up, they're dropping their defenses, they're removing the obstacles that are in the way of higher consciousness and removing the obstacles that are in the way of enlightenment. And so, it's really up to you. You're the only one that can change you. No one can do it for you. Someone can point it out for you, but only you can change you. Any questions? Any statements? Any challenges to this teaching today?
The first question has been written by a viewer. Why are we born in lower consciousness when our true nature is pure consciousness?
Well, our true nature might be pure beingness, might be the ultimate, but our human nature is survival. And as such, it is lower consciousness. And so we are born into lower consciousness because our awareness is on the animal, it's on the mind, it's on the body. And there's an identification with the mind and body, which is a false identification, but it's there in humans. When awareness discovers itself, in other words, when you discover who you truly are, this identification drops because it's obviously not real. It's obviously false. But until then, it's a bit difficult. All you can do is work towards higher consciousness, and the practices are simple. Practice openness, practice non resistance, practice meditation, practice self inquiry. Remove all beliefs that create you as a victim because you're not. You have to volunteer to be a victim. Have a look and see for yourself.
Next question has been written by Kelly. Are some people more naturally awake than others, meaning it's not as difficult in their practice to be with what's real?
Yes, that's because they've done it before. See, a lot of people don't remember past lives, so they don't believe that past lives exist. But in my experience, we've all lived before, and we've all done this before. If we're interested in truth, the chances are we've done it before many times. And so, whatever consciousness levels we managed to raise to in previous lives, we get that start in this life as well, to some degree. It comes in seed form and it comes out. And so, yeah, some people come in more switched on, more alert, higher consciousness than other people. That's true. Now you think, well, that's not fair, but of course it's fair. Everything's karmic. Everything's karmic. You want to develop good karma, you become a loving, caring, generous person. That works really well. You want to develop negative karma, just practice selfishness. Works the same way, except in a negative way. We create our own reality with the way we think. We are 100% responsible.
The following question has been written by Joseph. I've read Osho saying that being a witness comes after long efforts of yoga because it's rare for someone to only be aware and succeed. He said that was his problem and mistake for Krishnamurti to say to people, just being aware is enough. Please can you comment?
Osho loved to have shots at Krishnamurti, let's put it that way. Osho's main methodology towards enlightenment was witnessing. To watch the mind, to just keep witnessing the mind, develop that separation from the mind, detachment from the mind, and just keep witnessing. And at some point, you find yourself as the witness. You find yourself as pure awareness that is just aware of the mind. And at this point, you've woken up. You're no longer identified with the mind. It's gone. You're living as beingness now. And so his methodology was witnessing. He talked about it over and over again. When he says that Krishnamurti, it wasn't enough just to witness, well, that's debatable. Witnessing works. So does self-inquiry. So does meditation. And if you're really interested in heart, openness works. Non-resistance works. Taking down all the defense systems that are in the way of the perception of love. There's a few things that work. You've got to remember that Osho was a stirrer and he loved to stir up other teachers. If you look at him from that angle, rather than what he's saying is absolutely factual on every occasion, you're going to see what a great sense of humour he really had.
The next question is from Patrick. When there are difficult things to express within a relationship, is the first step to accept this situation as it is?
The first step is to accept the other. You know, when we have difficult times in relationships, quite often we take our own side. And in that way, it becomes a bit of a war. If you really want good communications with anybody, make sure that you're not only on your own side, you're also on their side. And if you're on their side, you'll be able to put yourself in their shoes and you'll be able to hear them from their point of view, which actually facilitates communication. Acceptance plays a big role in it, there's no doubt about it, but so does communication. When we truly look at what keeps relationships going in a healthy way, firstly, communication, secondly, commitment. Those two things, commitment and communication. But when we're only taking our own side inside a disagreement in an argument, we've basically gone to war. And unfortunately, the first casualty of war is usually truth. And this appears in the form of omission. Things aren't said that should be said. Things aren't owned that should be owned. And so you have a look. Acceptance is great. Accepting the other is wonderful. Accepting everything as it is wonderful. But if you want relationships to work well, particularly if you're in disagreements, make sure that you're on both sides, your side and their side.
Why do you think Osho was such a stirrer?
Because he was awake. People think, people project onto awake people all sorts of different things. But I got to tell you right now, you cannot control in any way someone who's awake. They are free. They're free to do whatever they want. And someone who's awake, who's teaching, has set themselves up basically as a motivator. Someone who's awake holds a presence. In that presence, you can find yourself as truth. But in the meantime, what they do most of the time is in satsang is talk. And the talks are motivators to get people to become willing enough to do whatever it takes to raise their consciousness levels and get free, enlightenment. And so you listen to the different teachers, and they're all in some way pointing to the truth and trying to motivate people to do what's necessary to find themselves as truth. And so Osho was a great salesman for truth, but he was a shit stirrer. He just loved causing trouble. I remember a story that I heard about him when he was in university, still studying to how he'd wear wooden shoes or wooden clogs along the corridors and the balconies on the wooden floor to make as much noise as possible, to stir up as many people as possible. This was his nature. He was a stirrer. He liked to cause trouble. You see, look at it this way. If everybody's sleeping, and they are, how do you wake them up? Really? How do you wake them up? Do you think whispering sweet nothings in their ear and telling them how wonderful they are is going to work? I don't think so. You cause as much chaos as you can, and then there might be a glimmer of awakening. And so Osho was a great stirrer. He caused all sorts of different devices to go off inside his own community and in the world in general. A device set by a master offers the potential of learning surrender. And he was great at it. Nobody's ever really challenged the sexual thing that he got into. It's like from sex to super consciousness. Everyone just bought it. There wouldn't be a harder way to get to super consciousness than through sex. There wouldn't be a harder way. But what it does do, if you get involved in sex and you get involved in sleeping around, you get so many opportunities to surrender, to practice acceptance of life because you cause so much trouble. It is a great big device. He would say, well, why just have Italian? Why not have English food and Chinese food and Greek food? Why be stuck with one type of woman when you can have all this smorgasbord? What trouble that would cause and did. You start playing with the primal imperatives of people, you're playing with something that can create an environment for surrender, an environment for acceptance, an environment to teach the mind exactly what it needs to learn to support higher consciousness and enlightenment. All teachers teach surrender because it is the bottom line. It is the doorway. The Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree and surrendered, which means he did nothing because surrender is a non-doing, and woke up. The practice of acceptance creates an environment of surrender. The harder life is, the more opportunities you have to surrender, to practice. Osho was a shit stirrer and he was a master. He was a master at setting devices for thousands of people. Have a close look and see. Do you think he was really interested in sex? He'd gone way beyond that.
The following question is from a viewer. Is it possible that if you are in higher consciousness, but you don't know because that is how you were born?
Yeah, it's absolutely possible. Kids who are born with higher consciousness tend to be a challenge to their parents and to their peers and to their teachers because they know things, they see things that most don't. Quite often they have the bigger picture in mind. So usually they're problem makers. And depending on what era they were born in is to how they're going to be treated. I think it's probably a hard life for a child who's born with higher consciousness because they're not likely to comply the same as other children. Someone with higher consciousness is not very into compliance.
The following question is from Dhananjay. Since the time I've started meditating regularly, I find a lot of things I do meaningless. I used to enjoy what I was doing at work, but over time, I feel it's meaningless and question why am I doing what I'm doing? Can you please comment?
Yeah. Look, since I've been a boy, I've been looking for the meaning of life. And I have not been successful as yet of finding a meaning for life. And at some point, I got to see the pointlessness of it all, the pointlessness of just going to work to make money over and over every day, same thing, repetitive, the same friends, the same conversations. And in looking for the meaning of life, I realized there probably isn't one. But what we can have is a beautiful life. And I found that to be true when I began serving heart instead of serving myself. I'd served myself really well till I was 33 years old. I'd been successful in business. But when I had a look at it, even though I was financially okay, I found that I was broke because I didn't have much heart, if any. Being a businessman had closed me down too much. And I started to realize that for 33 years, in a lot of ways, I'd wasted my life. It wasn't until I went into service of heart that I felt that I was really living. And I was getting what I called manageable happiness. Because while in service to others, service to the plants, service to animals, service to anything besides me, there was a certain joy that came, a certain happiness that came. And so I found that the way out of this, oh gosh, life is just meaningless or pointless, was to move into service, to move into a way of supporting love. And this is the way of the heart. And you'll discover that to serve heart, you have to be wide open. You have to drop all your resistances, drop your defense systems, walk through the world in a vulnerable way. This is the beauty way. This is the way of the heart. This is worthwhile.
The next question has been written by Vanita.
Aha.
I'm an Osho disciple. Everything what Osho, Ramana Maharshi, Mooji, Krishnamurti, Robert Adams, Adyashanti, Rupert Spira says resonates in my heart. When I look for I, thus I cannot be found. Everything happening by itself. Receiving happening without the solid perceiver. This solid entity is absent. Experiencing without the experiencer. But still, the pull of desires is felt. Identification with the past happens itself in day-to-day life. Can you please comment?
Yeah, Vanita, it sounds like you're drifting from reality into dream and then back into reality, because the truth is there is nobody here. There's a delusion that most humans have that there's a somebody here, and that's made up on memories from the past, projected to the future, and a whole pile of belief systems that are identified with. And when awareness starts to become aware of itself, or when the witness starts to be known as self, that all disappears. And people go through these different stages of flipping between that and flipping back to ego-based reality, which is identification. At this stage, the self-inquiry is very helpful. When the mind comes back in with its thoughts about self, the question arises, who's aware? Who's aware of these thoughts? So the mind is actively attempting to turn the witness back to itself, awareness back to itself. The flip-flopping can go on for a long time. For me, it went on for a whole year, flipping from being-based reality to ego-based reality and back again. And in that year, there was a lot of self-inquiry. As a matter of fact, every thought that arose in the mind was challenged with the question, what's aware? in an attempt to turn awareness back to itself, and it did. It's easier if you're in the presence of someone who's awake to do this, to stay awake, particularly in the early stages. And I was very fortunate in the early years. There was another man in Perth, West Australia, who was awake, called David Mark. And we used to spend a lot of time each day together, and we'd attend each other's satsangs and support each other in truth. And that was very helpful because I didn't have a Sangha back then. I just had this one guy, and he had me. And after a while, it felt like awareness that was aware of itself stuck to itself like two permanent magnets, just couldn't pull them apart. And the sense of identity completely disappeared. And so that was like a death, a permanent death of the I. It hasn't really arisen since. There's never a sense of anybody being here, just nothing, talking, that's all. And so you're at a stage of flip-flopping, flipping between ego-based reality and being-based reality. Keep supporting truth, don't support the ego. The mind is the one that does the support. If it keeps supporting truth, it'll support meditation, it'll support self-inquiry, it'll support openness. Give your life to truth and be free.
Peter would like to ask a question.
Yeah.
Hello, Vishrant. Can you hear me?
Very well, Peter. I can hear you very well.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Listen, since last time I spoke to you, I've really been I've been listening to you in my car on the way to work, and even now I'm trying to remember this question. It keeps coming and going, and I'm battling to get it out. But it really does feel like, for me, I'm at this stage in my life, Vishrant, where I'm toggling between this massive expansiveness that seems to be wanting to pull me in, and this terrible pain of still being me, this person. And it kind of bugs me when you say that it's up to you to do these things, because I try, but at the same time, it feels like the thing that's trying is getting weaker and weaker. So I don't know if I'm explaining myself well, but it feels like something bigger is wanting to pull even the trying away. When I talk to you, I feel this going away as well. Anyway, it's not really a question, but it's more a statement.
I do have a comment on it. It's like somewhere there's not an acceptance of the one that's trying. Somewhere there's resistance in there.
Yes.
And that resistance itself keeps bringing that somebody back. Everything has to be accepted, including the loss of beingness. Everything has to be accepted. And in that, the mind can then rest. It can never rest while it's in resistance to anything.
Right. So it just feels like a conundrum. It just feels like this.
Then you make the conundrum okay.
Okay. All right. So just accept the pain and the frustration, and just watch it.
Well, if you're in acceptance, Peter, you wouldn't be frustrated. The fact that you're frustrated suggests that you're in resistance.
Right. Thank you very much. I will. I just try and relax into that more.
Yes, that is the answer. The answer is relaxing. That's actually why I was given the name Vishrant, because I wasn't relaxed as a businessman when I applied for sannyas. And my name actually means relax. It was a sadhana given to me because it's what I needed to learn.
Yeah, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. It's like my whole heart just wants to jump out, but and I just want to expand, and yet there's just this tiny little
No, no,
niggly voice in the back going, "No, you've got to try harder. You've got to do your work." You know.
the want is the problem. The want
Yeah.
itself is resistance.
Yes, but you said the one desire that's worth keeping is the one that wants freedom, wants
Yeah,
truth, and now that is there. I know it's there. Otherwise, this wouldn't keep. Every
Peter,
day when I wake up, it comes back. You know, it's there all the time. But yeah.
Peter, you're very difficult to teach because
Sorry.
that last want has to die, but it doesn't die until the end. The desire for freedom, the desire for enlightenment has to be there, but towards the end, it has to die too. And it sounds like it's possible, it's near the end for you. So that want also has to die.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Vishrant.
Okay, Peter. The ego hangs out and survives through all sorts of methodologies towards the end. Mostly it creates helper thoughts to help you become enlightened, but they are also in the way because that's just the ego trying to survive, and it needs to lay down. It needs to learn to surrender. All desires are in the way. All attachments are in the way. Let everything go.
The next question has been written by Jasmine. Can you describe one consciousness and how to practice and realize that? Are there any specific exercises you can suggest? And that all is one in unity? Or is it just as you said, keep practicing self-inquiry or sakshi until something clicks?
Okay. So you can't really practice one consciousness because one consciousness is what is. It's the truth. But human beings have created themselves as separate by having a mind that sees itself as separate. You take away the mind, and there is no separation. We are one. It is the mind, particularly the ego, the identified mind, that creates itself as separate. You surrender that, and you find you are one. Particularly if you find yourself as beingness, you're just everything. You can't be separate. There is no duality then. The only time duality comes into play is when someone's ego-based, they think they're a somebody, and they think they're looking for God. That's God looking for God. There is no genuine separation, only an illusion of separation caused by the identified part of the mind thinking that somehow it's separate and that there's somewhere to go. There's nowhere to go. You already are beingness. You already are oneness. The only thing that's in the way is the I. Let go, let go, let go, and turn awareness onto itself. Turn that that's aware of the mind back to itself. The whole thing with oneness, people look for oneness. We already are that. You're looking for something you already are. You're just not perceiving it because you're perceiving it through the vehicle of the I, through the mind, which is not real even. Let go, let go, let go.
Jasmine would like to ask a question.
Mm-hmm. Hello, Jasmine.
Yep. Yes, okay. Thank you so much for answering and having these calls. I just found you, literally. I just give it, I surrender there's something way beyond me working here. So that's for sure. I also have a little bit of what Peter was talking about, which is, um, okay, so there are times when it's like coming out of like a deep meditation, when the mind, that I can stay in that space for like maybe few hours, and then kind of towards the latter part of the day kind of gets back to, okay, now what, like, it just gets back to like the person. So I'm trying to, and as Peter said, I think also I have this, I mean, I don't want to call it an excruciating pain, but it seems like that, of wanting wanting to experience the oneness, which we are. I understand that, but somehow it's not happening. Um so that's why I was asking, because I was listening to some of the Upanishads, and there are some practices of the Om practice, where you just drop all the states and different, anyways. I was just curious if you had anything like that, or is it just every single time just surrender? And also, when you talk about desires, I mean, I assume you're not talking about coffee and clothes and things, or are you?
Anything that creates resistance, Jasmine, brings awareness to the mind to some degree. And when a person is first starting to find beingness as self, or an emptiness, or a oneness of all, awareness tends to go back to the mind if the mind's contracting. And so creating a mind that doesn't create resistance is a really good idea. In Buddhism, it's called an economist mind, a mind that actually basically stays pretty level with whatever's happening, a mind that can take fire without reacting. And that's very difficult for us as human beings, because we're so defended, but we can do it. We can learn to let go. We can learn and train the mind to let go and be at peace. And so people wake up and they stay awake, but that's probably because their mind is supporting that somewhere. A mind that is willing to let go, a mind that is willing to self-inquire, this is the right way to go. I followed the way of the heart, which absolutely annihilated my ego. The way of the heart dictates that you be in service to others, you be in service to the planet, you be in service to animals, plants, whatever you're doing, you be in service. And in that, if you're genuinely doing that, you become very humble. And humility is basically an absence of the I. True humility is an absence of the I. And so for me, there was two wings happening. One was the wing of discipline, which was self-inquiry and meditation. The other was the wing of the heart, which was practiced through openness, generosity, kindness, giving. Two wings to fly in the marketplace with.
Okay.
So I kind of teach that methodology, the way of the heart, combined with discipline, combined with meditation, self-inquiry, whatever else, yoga, whatever works, basically. I'm not particular on anything. If it works, it's a good way to go. As far as the mind coming back and the pain of the coming back, you have to accept that there's a karmic number going on as well, and that we actually have to pay back our debts, whatever they might be. And karma plays a role in enlightenment. Two people can do exactly the same things to prepare for enlightenment. One can wake up and one may not wake up, and there's a karmic element in it. And you've got to accept karma. You've got to accept that, well, this is what is. In the acceptance, you can find peace. In non-acceptance, which is resistance, you can't find peace. And as a matter of fact, you're getting in the way of enlightenment because you're creating contraction.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
So it's really about accepting life as it is, in a way becoming a fatalist, because karma is going to take you out, or it's going to put you in. And we have to pay our bills back. We can't get away with anything. And so whatever merit we have, we get that, and whatever detriment we get that. In Buddhism, you go into a monastery and you talk to one of the ajaans and ask, oh, how can I raise my consciousness levels? And they'll say, well, you can become a monk or a nun. And they say, no, I don't want to do that. I want to be a layperson. They say, well, become generous, become giving, become a kind person. And they're right. They're absolutely right, because you accrue beautiful karma and you also have a nice life. So I advocate the way of the heart and discipline, both wings to fly with in the marketplace.
Okay.
Where are you, Jasmine? What country?
I'm located in New York. So I just happened to run across your live broadcast.
Yeah. You guys in New York, you guys are vaccinating pretty quickly over there.
Yeah, I got one shot. I have one more to go, which comes in 2 weeks. So, but you still have to be careful, because the way the vaccines work is that you cannot get it, but you can actually give it.
Yeah.
So you still have to wear your mask and do other things, but you won't get sick from it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Yeah. Well, I wish you the very, very best there. We're fortunate here in West Australia, where there isn't any virus at the moment. We're actually virus free, and
wow.
we're vaccinating the people who are being vaccinated, slowly, very slowly, but we're free. So watching the news and finding out what's happened in America and what's been happening in America is it's heartbreaking.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And, it's kind of like also, I don't know, I kind of have this double view about that, which is, which side of the coin is it? I mean, is it nature telling us we're, not accepting and doing? And even after all of the heartbreaks and all of the news and all of the doctors telling people to wear masks and be careful, they don't do it.
No.
So, so then you say, well, okay, so, so what can I do? If I have to be out, then I wear a double mask. If not, I stay inside and I find you. So that's pretty amazing to me.
I went into not knowing 22 years ago, because when we try to know anything, we get locked in our minds, and the reason we want to know is because we want to survive. It's a survival mechanism. But when we go to I don't know, there's no story anymore. It's over, and our mind starts to quieten down. And so I've been in I don't know for about 22 years, and it's lovely. It's like being a little kid again in wonderment.
Yeah, so it's quite remarkable. I mean, my ego would say, "Oh, I'm an intellectual. I have to have an answer for everything. I'm a scientist." But and therefore that alone gets in the way.
It does. And look, I have a mind that's reasonably good at mechanics and working out things as well. But I just love I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. I think I will adopt that as a mantra from going forward.
It's really a sweet one, because it means you're not living in your head trying to problem solve constantly. You're actually okay with not knowing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have to say, I've come a long way since I started. So, because if it wasn't an equation, I wasn't interested. So I've come quite a long way. So it's just the continuation of that practice, and I think I will remember what you just said and use it as a mantra, and just remember that's where it's all at.
What it'll give you is freedom.
Yes.
Freedom from this, because this is the prison. The mind is the prison.
Yeah. Yes, I recognize that.
Nice talking to you, Jasmine.
Thank you so much.
The next question is from a viewer. When I am peaceful, I still ask myself, is that all? Is it that easy? And I tell myself I must do something. Why is that so?
Because you have a mind that is trying to help you. And that's what it's been programmed to do, to help you. And it's now in the way because it's trying to help when it should be resting. But that's how you've been programmed. You've been programmed to develop a mind that looks for problems and solves them. And this is the case for everybody who's been to school. We've been programmed to look for problems and solve them. And of course, this is not actually restful. It is not relaxing. It is work. That is how we're programmed. For me to learn not to do that was quite difficult. I was just talking to Jasmine about I don't know. Beautiful answer to everything. Because in truth, most of the time, we don't. We're just guessing. But we're keeping ourselves locked in our mind, trying to work it out, trying to analyze, trying to problem solve. We didn't go to school and get taught how to be happy. We went to school and we were taught how to be little efficient problem solvers. And for most human beings, they stay efficient little problem solvers until they die. But we can reverse that. We can reverse engineer it and go back to what we were like when we were little kids, which is being here in no mind, in wonderment, in not knowing. It's up to you. You're going to create your reality by the way you think or not.
The following question has been written by Patrick. I can feel now that I have been looking to get ahead in life and protecting the heart. Now that I stop this, there is a pronounced feeling of a very vulnerable heart that is in front of everything. Is this what you mean by openness?
Yes. Yes. In the beginning, it feels vulnerable because it's been defended for so long that you notice the change, you notice the vulnerability. After a while, in being wide open, you don't notice the vulnerability, it becomes ordinary. It's only when you're first opening up that you notice that you're vulnerable because you're not used to it. It's not normal for you. You're used to hiding behind something, some kind of defense system. And the way of the heart dictates that you walk through the world undefended, vulnerable. But after a while, it just becomes ordinary. You don't notice that you're vulnerable, you just open. And it's beautiful because you love. You perceive love. Love everything and everybody. You love the good, the bad, and the ugly. The way of the heart is a beautiful way to live as a human being.
The following question is from Danita. Hi Vishrant, thanks for replying. I've been doing self-inquiry for 3 years, spending many hours on it, not sure when I'll be awake, feeling very helpless, trying to even see who is feeling helpless and tired. When I do self-inquiry, a lot of energy movement is observed between the chest that is circulating and causing pain. Feels like some energy is blocked. This all started happening since I did Vipassana. This desire to be free is always on the mind. It's not dropping. It seems that the mind is not stopping its efforts. Please comment.
Okay. Human beings tend to be full of pain. They carry pain bodies or repressed emotions or traumas. And as you start getting free, as you start opening up, all these traumas, all this pain, unfinished business starts coming to the surface so it can be freed. And people aren't expecting that. They're expecting light, they're expecting love, they're expecting openness. But really, it's a certain amount of laundry that's required to clean whatever's been repressed over lifetimes. And so when you start opening up, you find that all sorts of things start moving around in you. Different energy fields in the body start opening up, particularly if you're doing yoga or qigong or tai chi. These methodologies also help open the body further and release what's inside. But what's required more than anything else is the willingness to be okay with whatever appears. And so if discomfort appears, the willingness to be okay with it, the willingness to be warmly okay with it is best. And then it can leave and you can be free of that because it's been a guest of yours for a long time. And so this is another reason why it's so difficult to go from lower consciousness to higher consciousness, because when a person starts doing the work on themselves to open themselves up, all these unfinished businesses, all these pain bodies, all this trauma that may be caught inside starts to surface and wants to come out. And it feels pretty awful. There's hopelessness and helplessness in it, not just pain. And so people try to avoid it, but that's what they've been doing their whole lives. That's why it's locked in there. When we become genuinely, warmly welcoming whatever appears inside of us, we are really healing our psyches. We're really emptying the pain body out. We're preparing ourselves for higher consciousness. We're preparing ourselves for enlightenment. Let everything be okay. Let everything be okay. It doesn't matter how uncomfortable it is, just make it okay. It's better out than in, always.
The next question has been written by Eric. How about when developmental trauma is on board? Feels impossible yet necessary. I watched one of your videos about being in the marketplace with stuck energy.
Okay, that's a statement. Was there a question in it? How about
when developmental trauma is on board?
Yeah, well, I had to deal with that myself. I actually had a very rough upbringing as a child, institutionalized in a Catholic boarding school and basically tormented for 8 years. Had a lot of trauma by the time I left school. I was very closed, very angry young man, and I had to find a way to deal with it. And I did, because my main defense system was anger, and anger is just violence. And I got to examine anger. It's a defense system. It stops us from feeling something that's been touched. And I decided that what I'd do was, instead of defending myself from feeling, I would start to allow myself to feel. And so I wouldn't encourage anger. I wouldn't support anger, because with anger, you've got to be a victim. You've got to be blaming someone or something or yourself. And I stopped blaming and I started owning and owning the touch. Whatever someone did or said that touched me and or touched probably trauma, I would go, okay, that's okay. And I'd allow myself to feel the touch. And in the feeling, I started to heal the wounding. And over years, it all got healed because of that willingness to, instead of react and defend, to allow it to be touched, to allow myself to feel the wounding, which quite often had helplessness and hopelessness in it. But I wasn't interested in being wounded, and I wasn't interested in being controlled by the fear of feeling my wounding. And so I decided to heal it all. And anytime I got touched, anytime someone or something happened that touched me, instead of contracting and protecting myself, I'd allow myself to feel. I'd allow myself to be with what had been touched. And it started to heal. My understanding is clearly that we heal our wounding by feeling our wounding. It's been locked into our bodies. It's a prisoner, and it wants to get free because it's compressed energy. In our willingness to feel, we can start to heal. And I'm never, ever going to suggest to anybody that that's easy. It's hard. But if you don't give yourself a choice, which is what discipline is, you can do it. It's up to you.
Next, Jasmine would like to ask a question.
Hello, Jasmine, you're muted.
Sorry, unmute. Just a follow up to something you said earlier, which is about finding someone who's already aware, and that helps you. Does it have to be somebody in person, or because of the situation, it's almost impossible to go somewhere physically? But is it how do you do this given what's going on in the world?
Yeah. So I may have made a mistake, but you may have heard me wrong. Find someone awake. No, so find someone who's awake, someone who's enlightened, and be. I was very fortunate in my life that I had Osho Rajneesh as my teacher for 8 years, and he was awake. And then when the Advaita Vedanta teachers started coming to Perth, I would go to all their retreats, go to all their meetings, all their satsangs, and I was able to sit in the presence of people who were awake. I started hosting the Advaita Vedanta teachers into Perth, West Australia, so they'd come and stay in my house, and I got to be very close, and that proximity definitely helps, because anyone who's awake carries an energy field, a Buddha field, and in that Buddha field, it is so much easier to surrender. It is so much easier to find awareness of self. And what I found in doing satsang online with people all around the world is people are falling in once they learn to tune in, because the energy field seems to be transmitted through the internet. I have no idea how, but I have people having satori's all over the world simply by coming to satsang like you are right now and tuning into the energy field.
Okay, thank you.
So you are very welcome, Jasmine. Just let go, let go, let go. Thank you for satsang. Good to see you brave hearts here today.